Hi, I'm Carolyn Evans Hammond, and welcome to my tasting room. Carolyn's tasting room is where you can taste exciting wines with me. And tonight, we feature a flight of wines from Lodi, California. Lodi is located in the middle of California's Central Valley, and it may be best known for its Old Vine Zinfandel. And we'll be tasting a couple of those tonight, but it offers more variety than that. It has range. So tonight's lineup includes a 2020 Ironstone Vineyards Cabernet Sauvignon, the 2019 Seven Deadly Zins Old Vine Zinfandel, the 2021 McManus Family Vineyards Zinfandel, and the 2020 Michael David Winery Petite Petite. So let's taste. So the first wine in our flight is Californian Cabernet Sauvignon from Lodi. So pour yourself a glass and let's look. Notice the color, great depth of color, nice depth. It's sort of black in the middle and it tapers to a very narrow purple rim. So we'll be looking for concentration on the nose and palate because that usually suggests concentration. A swirl and a sniff. Isn't that lovely? Now this smells exactly like Cabernet. So Cabernet is often associated with the aroma of blackcurrant or blackcurrant liqueur, cassis. So give it a swirl and see if you notice that. I certainly do. So this is Hallmark Cabernet Sauvignon from California because there's a ripeness here. Do you notice that's very sweet, confected? But, you know, the nose and the palate is often different. And so I happen to know this is a dry table wine, so it's going to smell a little bit more confected than we're probably going to experience on the palate. But have a sip, let's just experience the wine. Isn't that lovely? Yes, we're getting the cassis, but do you notice the woody notes? A little bit of vanilla or nuttiness, maybe toasted nuttiness. That is from 6 months with American oak. So you're sort of tasting those nuances, which are have a natural affinity to Cabernet Sauvignon. So this is a lovely wine. Now let's taste it technically. Have a sip, let it sweep in. Focus on the sides of the palate. This is where we're going to detect acidity. Interesting. Very mouth-watering, very crisp when you focus on the sides, and that's because this actually has quite a bit of acidity. You don't notice when you're just sipping it because there's lots of mid-palate stuffing. But that acidity is keeping it quenching, upright, lit, and it leaves the palate scraped clean. And that acidity is important because, you know, we usually associate grape varieties or wine styles with nice balancing acidity or bright acidity with cooler regions. Lodi is, notoriously very warm, but it's not always just heat. There are places, microclimates, where you get cool breezes, you get great dural fluctuations, which means cool nights and warm days, which keeps the fruit fresh. Now have a sip. We're going to focus on the back of the palate to see if there's any alcoholic heat, because if you glance at the label, you'll see that this is 14.5% alcohol. So it's a high alcohol wine. It's full-bodied. But let's see if there's any alcoholic heat, because if there is, it means it's out of balance. And what we want is lush fruit cloaking that alcohol so you don't notice it at all. That's about balance. Balance is vital for all wine, but particularly wines that have something like 14.5% alcohol. So have a sip. None. No alcoholic heat. All you're getting is lush fruit that cascades with all sorts of flavors. Are you noticing that? Yes, cassis, but also black cherry. Maybe a nuance of cream, like chantilly cream or something. Bit of vanilla cream. Some mocha. Some melted milk chocolate. Lots going on, and it lingers on the finish. And it leaves the palate scraped clean. Now, I think there's a whisper. Have a sip, focus on the tip of the tongue to see if we can detect any residual sugar. Very little, very little. All of that sweet fruit stuffing is ripe fruit. It's not sugar. Great wine for the money, and I think it's a lovely expression of Cabernet Sauvignon from Lodi. The second wine in our flight is Seven Deadly Zins Old Vine Zinfandel. This is a wine you probably know. You've probably seen it around. It's got great distribution, and it's a wine that's been around a while. So pour yourself a glass and let's taste. In the glass, great depth of color. Now this is Zinfandel, so that tends to be quite deep in color, and this is certainly the case. Tapers to a very narrow rim, and if you give it a swirl and look at the legs, which is how the wine sort of drapes down the inside of the glass, the legs are quite prominent or noticeable. That's an indication of alcohol. We know that this is a full-bodied wine at 15% alcohol, so it's not a lightweight, so we know that going in. So give it a swirl and a sniff. Oh, isn't that lovely? Very different expression than the Cabernet Sauvignon. It's important because, the grape variety is where the most flavor comes from, so which makes perfect sense. Cabernet tastes like cassis. Zinfandel tastes like dark fruit. So think blackberries and damson plums and those sorts of things. And that's what we're getting. Do you notice that? Give it a swirl. So yes, blackberry, black cherry, poached damson plums, as well as nuances of smokiness. Notice that? A hint of maybe toasted tobacco. So lots going on, but brawny, dark aromas. Even a hint of charcoal. I love that. So lots going on, lots to engage with on the nose and on the palate. Let's just experience it first, and then we'll get technical. Sweeps in, yes, lots of dark flavors, but do you notice the brightness? This tastes lit, like lit from within. It's bright. There's a quenching element here that I really like. There's great balance between grapefruit in the middle and mouthwatering acidity. So have a sip. We'll focus on the sides of our tongue to see just how much the acidity is there. Yes, lots of acidity. Fantastic for balancing all that ripe fruit and all those brawny flavors, and no alcoholic heat at the back of the palate at all. So the alcohol is hidden by, or cloaked if you like, by rich extract and fruit, and that fruit tastes lush. The tannins are very finely grained, so there's no unpleasant tug at sort of around the gums, which is where you feel tannins, tugging sensation around the gums. Not so here. Tastes lush, very pleasurable, yet those finely grained tannins hold the fruit in the finish, and the finish lingers, so it's persistent, which bridges to whatever you're having, with this. Maybe you're having this with barbecue or something like that. So great value wine, and certainly a lovely expression of Old Vine Zinfandel from Lodi. And the third wine in our flight is McManus Zinfandel. So this is a wine that, is very different, I think, than the last wine. The last wine is one I associate with dark fruit. This one I associate with red fruit, which is interesting because Zinfandel can have different expressions. So let's see. Pour yourself a glass, give it a swirl. Actually, let's look at the wine first. Notice immediately it's actually slightly more transparent than the last wine. Just take note there. This is not 15% alcohol, but 14% alcohol, so slightly more medium-bodied than the last one. And on the nose, very different than the last one, isn't it? Yeah. So there's more red fruit here, sort of cherry, red and black cherry, muddled maybe. A hint maybe of maraschino cherry. That sort of confected note. Maybe cooked sugar like toffee or something. And red, sort of strawberry jam. So interesting expression A different expression than the last one, but clean, bright, and certainly fetching. It's a pleasure to, nose this wine. And on the palate, sweeps in, tasty, beautifully balanced. Nothing is sticking out, which is always important. You want to look for that sort of sweep of flavor with nothing sticking out. No harsh acidity, nothing too shrill, no tug of tannins that are unpleasant, no alcoholic heat at the back of the palate, and not too much sugar that's going to cloy on the finish. You want acidity to balance any sweetness so your palate is scraped clean and the wine remains refreshing. So I think all of those things are at play here, and you notice that by just experiencing the wine with that technical backdrop in your head. Yeah. So let's have a sip and get a little bit technical and just see how it's expressing itself in terms of flavor profile, how it cascades. Sweeps in. The palate seems a little bit more blue or black fruited than the nose would suggest. I'm getting wild blueberry first, and then as that recedes, the red fruit comes a little bit sort of red cherry again, and the oak flavors come through quite nicely, actually. It's well integrated. So you're getting the vanilla, you're getting milk chocolate again, creamy note, yes, and the nuttiness tastes a little bit like marzipan. Like, notice that? Like almond paste or something like that. And it lingers on the finish. So it's a pleasant wine. Now, this is full-bodied. It's 14% alcohol. But there's also a little bit of residual sugar. Even though the palate is scraped clean, because there's enough acidity to balance it out, it does have some residual sugar, which you notice at the tip of the tongue. Have a sip and focus. Notice that? And that tells you there is some residual sugar. I think this has, to the tune of around somewhere between 10 and 15 grams per liter. So just enough to round it out, taste polished, taste quenching, but also satisfying, if you like. It's a kind of wine you can easily enjoy cocktail style because it's a pleasure to drink, but well balanced. And it lingers on the finish, and it's a kind of wine you can enjoy, at a party. And the last wine on our flight is from the Michael David Winery, and it's called Petite Petite. Petite Petite is a reference to the two grape varieties in the blend. It's 85% Petite Syrah, 15% Petite Verdot. So we know that going in, and give yourself a pour and give it a swirl. Now, do you notice? Notice this. This is, yes, the legs are very evident. We know that it's very full-bodied. Glance at the label reveals it's 15%. So you can see that, but also notice the color. It's like the color drapes down the sides of the glass too. There's just so much pigment in this wine, which is because of the grape varieties. These are very pigmented grapes. So good wine for, those who like big, bold reds. And also notice just how opaque it is. It's opaque all the way to the rim. It's just it's a big, opaque, big red. Swirl and this stuff. What are you getting? I'm getting bumbleberry jam. Poached plums. And there's a whisper of bitter chocolate, like bitter sweet chocolate. Do you notice that? Lovely. And black cherry, yes. This did spend some time with American and French oak, and you're getting that in terms of a certain nuttiness as well as a little bit. Do you notice a little bit of Brazil nut? To me, it's very clear. It's exactly Brazil nut. I could nose this all day. There's lots going on. Now, let's have a sip and see how it expresses itself on the palate. Rolls in slowly, sort of like thunder. It's big, it's bold, it's powerful, it's brawny, it's muscular, and it's not sprightly. There's a density here, a weight that is evident flavor-wise as well as texturally and structurally. And I like that because it's an expression that is very different than the other three wines we tasted. It's a kind of wine that works really well for those who like that broad appeal. They don't want something that's too bright. It's a kind of wine that works very well in cold weather. So let's have another sip, and we'll focus on the sides of the palate to see if we can isolate the acidity and see if it's, lower than the other ones. Notice that? It's not as mouthwatering as the last three. It's balancing. It holds everything nicely together and upright, but it's not wildly acidic. There's not tons of acidity, just enough to balance all that ripe fruit. And that fruit expression echoes everything we found on the palate. So yes, you're getting the damsons, the poached damsons. Yes, you're getting the jammy nuances, but it's not sweet. This is a wine that, is a dry table wine. There's a whisper of residual sugar, probably around 4 or 5 grams. And I know that just by tasting it, but it is not sweet. It's dry, it finishes bone dry, and it's beautifully balanced. I mean, it tastes almost sphere-like, not glossy. It's almost like a matte tasting wine, but beautiful for, certain things. This is the kind of wine I would love to pair with sticky ribs, off the grill, if you live in a climate that allows for that. But you could also pair it with something like bitter, dark chocolate. Fantastic. So there you have it. 4 wines from Lodi, California. Hopefully you went away with a sense of the range available from that region. So much more than Old Vine Zinfandel, but certainly that too. Which one did you like best? Let me know on social media. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because I'm coming right back with another flight of delicious wines here on Carolyn's Tasting Room, so you can drink better and learn how.